The wagon wheel hit another rock, jolting Samuel Morrison awake from his doze. Dust clouds swirled around the stagecoach as it bounced along the rough trail between Tucson and Fort Apache. Sam rubbed his eyes and looked out the window at the endless desert stretching in every direction. Red rocks and scattered cacti broke up the brown landscape under the blazing Arizona sun. "How much further?" asked the woman sitting across from him. Mrs. Henderson had been complaining about the heat and dust since they left Tucson 3 hours ago. "Driver said we'd reach Willow Creek Station by noon," Sam replied, checking his pocket watch. It was already past 11. Sam had been traveling for 2 weeks, making his way west from Chicago to take up a position as the new Indian agent at Fort Apache. The Bureau of Indian Affairs had selected him based on his experience as a school teacher and his reputation for fairness. What they didn't know was that Sam had never actually met an Apache person in his life. The stagecoach lurched to a sudden stop. Through the dust cloud, Sam could see the driver climbing down from his seat, cursing under his breath. "What's the problem?" Sam called out. "Busted spoke," the driver replied. "Going to take me at least an hour to fix, maybe 2. Mrs. Henderson groaned. "In this heat? We'll roast alive." Sam climbed out of the coach to stretch his legs. The desert air hit him like opening an oven door. In the distance, he could see a small cluster of buildings that must be Willow Creek Station. It looked to be about a mile away across the flat desert floor. "I'm going to walk to the station," he announced. "Get some water and see if they have any tools that might help." The driver shrugged. "Suit yourself, mister. Just watch out for rattlers and Apaches." Sam had heard plenty of stories about Apache raids during his journey west. Most travelers spoke of them in hushed tones, describing fierce warriors who could appear and disappear like ghosts in the desert. The newspapers back east were full of sensational accounts of Apache attacks on settlers and cavalry units. He grabbed his hat and canteen and started walking toward the station. The sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat was already soaking through his shirt. Sam had worn his best traveling suit for the journey, but now he was regretting not packing something more suitable for the desert. After 20 minutes of walking, he was seriously questioning his decision. The station didn't seem any closer, and his water was already running low. His feet were blistering in his leather shoes, and the heat was making him dizzy. That's when he saw her. She was sitting in the shade of a large boulder, so still that he almost missed her completely. An Apache woman, probably in her 30s, with long black hair braided down her back. She wore a simple brown dress that looked like it had been made from government-issue fabric, but she had decorated it with colorful beadwork around the collar and sleeves. Sam stopped walking. His heart started beating faster. Everything he had heard about Apaches ran through his mind. Were there others nearby? Was this some kind of trap? The woman looked up at him calmly. She didn't seem surprised to see him, almost as if she had been expecting him to come walking across the desert. "Water?" she said in English, holding up a clay jar. Sam hesitated. His throat was parched, and his canteen was nearly empty. But should he trust her? What if the water was poisoned? What if this was some kind of trick? The woman seemed to read his thoughts. She lifted the jar to her own lips and took a long drink, then held it out toward him again. "Water," she repeated. Sam's thirst won out over his caution. He approached slowly, ready to run if necessary. The woman remained seated, making no sudden movements. Up close, he could see that she was probably around his own age, with intelligent dark eyes and weathered hands that spoke of hard work. He accepted the jar and drank deeply. The water was cool and clean, the best thing he had tasted in days. "Thank you," he said, handing the jar back. The woman nodded. "You walked to station?" "Yes." "The stagecoach broke down back there." He pointed in the direction he had come from. She stood up, and Sam was surprised by how tall she was. Most of the Apache people he had seen from a distance appeared small and slight, but this woman was nearly as tall as his own 5 feet and 8 inches. "I walk with you," she said. "Station is far still." Sam wasn't sure what to make of this offer. Was she being helpful? Or did she have some ulterior motive? But looking around at the endless desert, he realized he could use the help. The sun was getting higher and he was already exhausted. "All right," he said. They walked in silence for several minutes. The woman moved with an easy grace across the rough terrain, while Sam stumbled over rocks and struggled to keep up. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, following a path that was invisible to his eyes. "What's your name?" Sam asked, trying to make conversation. "Maria," she replied. "I'm Samuel. Sam." She nodded, but didn't say anything else. Sam tried to think of something else to talk about, but he realized he knew almost nothing about Apache culture or customs. All his preparation for his new job had focused on government policies and regulations. "Do you live near here?" he asked. "Sometimes," Maria said. "My people move." Sam knew that many Apache bands were nomadic, following seasonal patterns of hunting and gathering. The government had been trying to force them onto reservations, with mixed success. "Are you going to the station too?" he asked. Maria glanced at him sideways. "I trade there sometimes. They give me coffee, sugar. I give them—" She paused, searching for the right English word. "Things they need." Sam wondered what kind of things an Apache woman might trade, but he didn't want to pry. They continued walking in silence. After another half hour, they finally reached Willow Creek Station. It was a rough collection of adobe buildings surrounded by a wooden fence. A few horses stood in a small corral, and smoke was rising from a chimney. "Sam!" called a voice. Sam looked up to see a bearded man in suspenders approaching them. "You must be the new Indian agent. Got your telegram saying you'd be coming through. Name's Pete Johnson. I run this station." "Pleased to meet you," Sam said, shaking the man's hand. He noticed Pete's eyes flick nervously to Maria, who had stopped a few feet away. "Maria," Pete nodded to her. "Got that coffee you wanted?" "Yes," she replied. "You have sugar too?" "Sure do. Come on in and we'll settle up." Pete led them into the main building, which served as both a store and a restaurant for travelers. The interior was dim and much cooler than outside. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with canned goods, tools, ammunition, and other supplies. "Your stagecoach breakdown?" Pete asked Sam. "Busted spoke. Driver's working on it, but he could use some tools if you have any to spare." "I'll send my boy Jimmy out with the wagon," Pete said. "He can give the driver a hand and bring you folks back here to wait in the shade." Pete turned to Maria. "What do you need today?" 2 pounds coffee, 2 pounds sugar," she said. Pete gathered the items and placed them on the counter. "That'll be $6. Maria reached into a small leather pouch and counted out the coins carefully. Sam watched as she placed 6 silver dollars on the counter, one by one. Pete scooped up 5 of the dollars, leaving 1 on the counter. "Keep the extra," he said, "for bringing the agent here safe." Maria looked at the remaining dollar, then at Sam. "I do not bring him for money." "I know that," Pete said, "but you helped him out, and that's worth something." Maria hesitated for a moment, then picked up the dollar and put it back in her pouch. Sam felt uncomfortable with the exchange, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Pete seemed friendly enough, and Maria appeared to be a regular customer. But something about the interaction felt wrong. "Can I buy you both some lunch?" Sam offered. "It's the least I can do after Maria helped me get here." Pete nodded approvingly. "Got some good beef stew on the stove. Maria, you staying?" Maria glanced at Sam, then nodded. "Yes." They sat at a rough wooden table while Pete served up bowls of stew and thick slices of bread. The food was simple but filling, and Sam realized he was hungrier than he had thought. "So you're the new agent at Fort Apache," Pete said, settling into a chair across from them. Heard the last one quit after only 6 months. Why did he quit? Sam asked. Pete glanced at Maria, who was eating quietly. Let's just say it's a challenging position. The Apaches are difficult to deal with. Sam noticed Maria's jaw tighten slightly, but she didn't look up from her food. I'm hoping to take a different approach, Sam said. I believe in treating people fairly, regardless of their background. Pete chuckled. That's real noble of you, Sam, but you might find things are more complicated than they seem. Before Sam could respond, a young man burst through the door. Pa! There's a dust cloud coming up the road. Looks like trouble. Pete jumped up and grabbed a rifle from behind the counter. How many riders? Can't tell yet, but they're coming fast. Pete looked at Sam. You armed? I have a pistol, Sam said, though he had little experience using it. Good. Maria, you better, Pete started to say, but when he looked around, Maria was gone. Her empty bowl sat on the table, but there was no sign of where she had gone. Where did she go? Sam asked. Apaches can disappear faster than a shadow, Pete said grimly. Come on, we need to get ready. Sam followed Pete outside, his heart pounding. Through the shimmering heat, he could see a group of riders approaching at a gallop. As they got closer, he could make out at least 6 men on horseback. Are they Apache? Sam asked. Pete squinted at the approaching riders. No, he said, lowering his rifle slightly. Looks like cavalry. Sure enough, as the riders drew nearer, Sam could see the blue uniforms and yellow trim of the U.S. cavalry. The group thundered into the station yard, horses lathered with sweat and dust. The lead rider dismounted quickly. He was a tall, lean man with a mustache and lieutenant's bars on his shoulders. I'm Lieutenant Bradley from Fort Apache, he announced. We're tracking a group of Apache raiders who hit a ranch south of here yesterday. Anyone see anything suspicious? Pete stepped forward. Haven't seen any raiding parties, Lieutenant. Just the usual traffic. Lieutenant Bradley's eyes swept the area, taking in every detail. We have reason to believe they might be trading stolen goods at way stations along this route. Not here, Pete said firmly. I run a legitimate business. The lieutenant's gaze fell on Sam. You are? Samuel Morrison. I'm the new Indian agent on my way to Fort Apache. Bradley's expression shifted slightly. Ah, Morrison, we've been expecting you. Have you seen any Apaches in the area? Sam hesitated. Should he mention Maria? She had helped him, and he didn't want to get her in trouble. But if she was involved with raiders... I met one Apache woman, he said carefully. She helped me when I was walking here from my broken-down stagecoach. She seemed peaceful. Where is she now? Bradley asked sharply. I don't know. She left during lunch. Bradley turned to Pete. You know this woman? Pete shrugged. Maria comes by sometimes to trade. Never caused any trouble? Maria, Bradley repeated, making a note in a small book. What does she trade? Coffee, sugar, basic supplies, Pete said. Pays in cash. Bradley's eyes narrowed. Where would an Apache woman get cash? The implication hung in the air. Sam felt a knot forming in his stomach. Had Maria been paying with stolen money? There are many ways to earn money honestly, Sam said. Maybe she sells crafts or provides services. Bradley gave him a skeptical look. Mr. Morrison, you'll learn that things aren't always as they seem out here. Apache women don't typically have access to that kind of money unless they're involved in raiding or trading stolen goods. Sam wanted to argue, but he realized he had no real knowledge to back up his defense of Maria. He had only known her for a few hours. We'll be continuing our patrol, Bradley announced. If you see any suspicious Apache activity, send word to Fort Apache immediately. The cavalry unit remounted and rode off in a cloud of dust. Sam watched them disappear into the desert, feeling troubled. Don't let Bradley get to you, Pete said. He's been chasing Apache raiders for 2 years and hasn't caught a single one. Makes him a bit paranoid. What do you think? Sam asked. About Maria, I mean. Pete was quiet for a moment. Maria's always paid fair and never caused trouble, but Bradley's got a point. It's unusual for an Apache woman to have that much money. Makes you wonder. Sam thought about his brief interaction with Maria. She had seemed genuinely helpful, sharing her water and guiding him to the station. But he had to admit he knew almost nothing about her or her circumstances. A wagon appeared on the horizon, heading toward the station. As it got closer, Sam could see it was Pete's son Jimmy, returning with the stagecoach passengers and driver. Looks like they got the wheel fixed, Pete observed. Sam gathered his belongings, still thinking about Maria and the questions her presence had raised. As the new Indian agent, he would be dealing with Apache people regularly. He needed to learn to separate fact from prejudice. But he also couldn't afford to be naive about potential dangers. The stagecoach was ready to continue its journey. Sam thanked Pete for his hospitality and climbed back into the coach with Mrs. Henderson, who immediately began complaining about the delay. As they pulled away from Willow Creek Station, Sam looked back at the boulder where he had first seen Maria. The shade was empty now, but he found himself wondering where she had gone and whether he would see her again. The rest of the journey to Fort Apache passed without incident. Sam watched the landscape change from desert to pine-covered mountains as they climbed higher into the Apache homeland. When they finally arrived at the fort in the late afternoon, he was struck by how different it looked from what he had expected. Fort Apache was not a traditional fort with high walls and watchtowers. Instead, it was a collection of adobe and wooden buildings spread across a valley floor, surrounded by some of the most beautiful mountain scenery Sam had ever seen. Pine trees covered the hillsides, and a clear stream ran through the center of the compound. Colonel James Parker, the fort's commanding officer, met Sam at the stagecoach. "Welcome to Fort Apache, Morrison," the colonel said, shaking his hand. "I trust your journey wasn't too eventful." "Actually, it was quite interesting," Sam replied. "I met an Apache woman at Willow Creek Station. Maria, I think her name was." The colonel's expression grew serious. "Maria? What was she doing at the station?" "Trading for coffee and sugar. She seemed peaceful enough." Colonel Parker was quiet for a moment. "Morrison, I should tell you something about Maria. She's not just any Apache woman. She's the daughter of Chief Apache, one of the most influential leaders among the White Mountain Apaches. Her presence at that station was probably not a coincidence." Sam felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "Chief Apache has been trying to negotiate with the government for months. He wants better conditions for his people on the reservation, more food rations, medical supplies. The Bureau has been ignoring his requests." "And you think Maria was there because of me? Because she knew I was the new agent?" "It's possible," the colonel said. "The Apache communication network is remarkably efficient. Word of your arrival has probably already spread throughout the reservation." Sam thought back to his encounter with Maria. Had she really just happened to be sitting by that boulder, or had she been waiting for him? And if so, what did she want? "There's something else you should know," Colonel Parker continued. "Lieutenant Bradley came through here an hour ago. He seems to think this Maria might be involved with the recent raiding activities." "Based on what evidence?" Sam asked. "Mostly circumstantial. The timing of her appearances at trading posts, the fact that she has money to spend. But Bradley tends to see Apache raiders behind every rock." They walked toward the Indian Agency office, a modest adobe building near the center of the compound. Sam's predecessor had left the office in disarray, with files scattered everywhere and correspondence unanswered for weeks. "Your first priority," Colonel Parker explained, "will be to restore some order to relations with the Apache bands. Chief Apache is getting impatient, and some of the younger warriors are talking about leaving the reservation." Sam spent the next few hours getting oriented to his new position. The challenges were more complex than he had anticipated. The Apache people were dealing with inadequate food supplies, poor medical care, and constant pressure from settlers wanting their land. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington seemed more concerned with paperwork than addressing real problems. As evening fell, Sam walked to his new quarters, a small adobe house behind the agency office. The mountain air was cool and clean, a welcome relief after the desert heat. Stars were beginning to appear in the clear sky. He was settling in for the night when he heard a soft knock at his door. Sam opened it cautiously, not sure who would be visiting him so late. Maria stood in the shadows outside his door, her face barely visible in the darkness. "We need to talk," she said quietly. Sam hesitated, his hand still on the door handle. Maria stood in the moonlight, her dark eyes serious and unreadable. Everything he had learned that day ran through his mind, the cavalry's suspicions, Colonel Parker's warnings, the questions about where she got her money. "It's late," he said carefully. "Perhaps we could meet tomorrow at the agency office." "No," Maria said firmly. "Too many ears there, too many eyes watching." She glanced around the compound, and Sam noticed how naturally she moved in the darkness, like someone accustomed to traveling unseen. "Please," she added, and something in her voice made him step aside. Maria entered the small room and waited while Sam lit an oil lamp. In the flickering light, he could see her more clearly than he had at the trading post. Her beaded dress was dusty from travel, and there were small cuts on her hands that looked fresh. "You want to know about the money?" she said without preamble. Sam blinked in surprise. How did you—" "Your face shows everything you think," Maria said. "Like all white men, you think Apache women are ignorant, that we cannot earn money honestly." "That's not what I think," Sam protested, though he realized there was some truth in her words. Maria reached into her leather pouch and pulled out several silver dollars, placing them on his small wooden table. $3 from Pete today, but before that, many more dollars from other places. She sat down across from him, uninvited, but somehow making it seem natural. "You want to know where this comes from? I will tell you. But first, you must promise something." "What kind of promise?" "That you will listen with your heart, not just your head, and that you will not repeat what I say to the soldiers." Sam studied her face in the lamplight. Colonel Parker had warned him that Apache negotiation tactics could be complex, but Maria seemed to be asking for simple trust. "I promise to listen," he said, "but I can't promise to keep information from the military if it involves illegal activities." Maria nodded slowly. "That is honest, at least." "Very well." She picked up one of the silver dollars and held it up to the light. "This money comes from teaching." "Teaching? I speak English. I speak Spanish. I speak 4 different Apache languages, and I read." She paused, letting that sink in. "How many people at this fort can do all those things?" Sam had to admit it was an impressive list. Most of the soldiers and settlers he had met spoke only English, and many couldn't read at all. "Where did you learn?" he asked. "From missionaries when I was young. They came to teach us about their God, but I was more interested in their books. Later from Mexican traders who needed someone to translate. From government men who came to make treaties they never kept." Maria stood and walked to Sam's window, looking out at the fort compound. "For 3 years now, I work with families who have problems with the agency. Apache families who cannot understand the papers they must sign, who cannot read the rules that change every month, who cannot speak to the doctors when their children are sick." "You're a translator," Sam said, understanding beginning to dawn. "Translator, yes, but more than that. I teach Apache children to read English, so they will not be cheated like their parents. I teach Apache women to count money, so traders cannot steal from them. I teach Apache men about government laws, so they know their rights." She turned back to face him. For this teaching, families pay me what they can. Sometimes money, sometimes food, sometimes horses. The money I save to buy supplies that people need, medicine, coffee, sugar, cloth. Sam felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. While he had been wondering if Maria was involved in raiding, she had been running what amounted to an informal education and social service program. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because you are the new agent. Because my father believes you might be different from the others. And because my people need help that only an agent can provide." "Your father is Chief Alchese?" "Yes. He sent me to watch you today, to see what kind of man you are." "And what did you decide?" Maria was quiet for a long moment. "You drink water offered by a stranger. You walk beside someone your people fear. You ask questions instead of making assumptions. These are good signs." She sat back down and leaned forward intently. "But being good-hearted is not enough. The problems my people face are bigger than good hearts can fix." "What kind of problems?" "Sick children who die because there is no medicine. Families who go hungry because food rations are not enough. Young men who talk of leaving the reservation because they see no future here." Sam knew these were common problems on reservations throughout the territory, but hearing them described by someone living them gave the issues new urgency. "And you think I can help?" "Maybe. If you are willing to listen and learn. If you can see past the stories soldiers tell about Apache raiders behind every rock." There was a bitter edge to her voice that made Sam wince. Clearly, Maria was aware of the suspicions surrounding her. "Lieutenant Bradley thinks you might be connected to recent raiding activities," Sam said carefully. Maria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Bradley thinks every Apache is a raider. Last month, he arrested an old woman for carrying a bag of corn. He said it was stolen from a ranch. It was corn she grew herself, in her own garden." "But there have been raids. People have been attacked." "Yes," Maria admitted. "Young men who are angry and desperate, who see their families suffering and believe fighting is the only answer. But not all Apache are raiders, just as not all white men are soldiers." Sam realized she had a point. He had been letting the fears and prejudices of others color his judgment. "Tell me about your father's negotiations with the government," he said. Maria's expression grew even more serious. "My father has been trying to meet with Washington officials for 8 months. He wants to discuss moving some of our people to better land, where they can farm and raise cattle. He wants schools for the children and a hospital for medical care. Those seem like reasonable requests. The previous agent never forwarded my father's letters to Washington. We found them all in his desk when he left, unopened." Sam felt a surge of anger at his predecessor's negligence. "I'll make sure your father's concerns reach the proper authorities." "Words are easy," Maria said. "My people have heard many promises from many agents. Then I'll have to prove myself through actions." Maria studied his face intently. "Tomorrow, will you come with me to see some of the problems I spoke of?" "Where?" "To the reservation areas where families live, where children go hungry, where people are sick. You cannot help what you have not seen." Sam hesitated. Leaving the fort to visit Apache settlements without military escort would be highly irregular. Colonel Parker would probably forbid it. "I'm not sure that would be wise," he said. "Wise?" Maria's eyes flashed. "Is it wise to make decisions about people's lives without knowing how they live?" "It's not that simple. There are protocols, procedures." "There are people dying while you follow protocols," Maria interrupted. Her words stung because Sam knew there was truth in them. How could he effectively advocate for the Apache people if he had never seen their actual living conditions? "If I agreed to this," he said slowly, "how would I explain my absence from the fort?" "You are the Indian agent. Tell them you are visiting the Indians you are supposed to be helping." It was so simple and logical that Sam almost smiled. Sometimes the most obvious approach was the best one. "All right," he said, "but we do this properly. I'll inform Colonel Parker that I'm making an inspection tour of reservation conditions." Maria nodded approvingly. "Good. Meet me at sunrise by the stream behind the fort. Come on horseback and bring your medical supplies." "Medical supplies? I'm not a doctor." "You have a medicine chest that came with the agency supplies. Basic things, bandages, laudanum, quinine. For many families, this is the only medicine they can get." After Maria left, Sam spent a restless night thinking about their conversation. Everything he thought he knew about the situation at Fort Apache was being challenged. Maria was clearly an educated, capable woman who was trying to help her people, not the primitive savage he had been led to expect. The next morning, Sam informed Colonel Parker of his plan to tour reservation areas and assess living conditions. "I'm not sure that's wise without an escort," the colonel said. "Some of the Apache settlements are quite remote." "I'll be with a guide who knows the area well," Sam replied, which was technically true. "Very well, but I want you back by nightfall. And if you encounter any problems, fire 3 shots in the air. We'll send out a patrol." Sam borrowed a horse from the fort stable and rode to the meeting point by the stream. Maria was already there, mounted on a beautiful paint horse that looked like it had been bred for endurance rather than show. "Ready?" she asked. They rode out of the fort and into the mountains, following trails that were nearly invisible to Sam's untrained eye. Maria moved with complete confidence through the rugged terrain, occasionally pointing out landmarks or plants with medicinal properties. Their first stop was a small settlement tucked into a canyon about 5 miles from the fort. Sam was shocked by what he saw. The Apache families were living in rough shelters made from scavenged materials: old army canvas, discarded lumber, brush, and mud. Many of the structures looked like they wouldn't survive a strong wind. "Government promised houses," Maria explained as they dismounted. "That was 2 years ago." Children came running to greet Maria, chattering in Apache and clutching at her skirts. She spoke to them gently, then turned to Sam. "They want to know if you are a good white man or a bad white man." "What should I tell them?" "That depends on what you plan to do after today." An elderly woman emerged from one of the shelters, moving slowly and coughing repeatedly. Maria spoke to her in Apache, then translated for Sam. "She has lung sickness. It started during the cold season and has not gotten better. She cannot keep food down, and she has lost much weight." Sam could see that the woman was seriously ill. Her skin had a grayish pallor, and her breathing was labored. "Has she seen a doctor?" "The fort doctor comes here once every 3 months if we are lucky. Last time he was here, he said she needs better food and warmer shelter. But where can she get these things?" Sam opened his medical supply kit and found a bottle of cough syrup. It wasn't much, but it might provide some relief. He handed it to the woman along with careful instructions, which Maria translated. They visited 6 more families that morning, each presenting challenges that made Sam's heart ache. A young mother with 3 small children who had no warm clothing for the coming winter. A man who had been injured in a fall and couldn't work, leaving his family without income. Children who were clearly malnourished, their growth stunted by insufficient food. At each stop, Maria distributed small amounts of coffee, sugar, or other supplies from her saddlebags. Sam began to understand where her mysterious money was going, directly back to families in need. "How do you keep track of who needs what?" he asked as they rode between settlements. "I visit every family at least once each month. I know which children are sick, which men cannot work, which women are expecting babies. This is how Apache people have always taken care of each other." "But you're doing this alone. Shouldn't there be government programs to help?" Maria gave him a look that was both sad and ironic. "There are programs on paper in Washington. Money is allocated, supplies are purchased, officials write reports. But somehow, very little reaches the people who need it. As the day progressed, Sam began to see a pattern. The Apache people were struggling not because they were lazy or incompetent, but because the systems designed to help them were either ineffective or corrupt. Meanwhile, Maria was single-handedly trying to fill the gaps with her own resources and knowledge. Their last stop was at a school that had been abandoned for over a year. The building was solid adobe construction, but the windows were broken and the roof was leaking in several places. "Government built this 2 years ago," Maria explained. "Sent a teacher from the East who lasted 3 months. She said Apache children were too difficult to educate." Sam walked through the empty classroom, imagining it filled with eager students. "What happened to the school supplies?" "Some were taken back to the fort. Some were sold to traders. The rest rotted in the rain." "But you said you teach children to read." "Under trees, in family shelters, wherever we can gather. But it would be better to have a real school." Sam turned to face her. "Could you run a school like this, if it were properly repaired and supplied?" Maria's eyes lit up with interest. "You think the agency would allow an Apache woman to teach?" "I think the agency needs someone who understands both cultures and can actually communicate with the students." They rode back toward Fort Apache as the sun was setting, Sam's mind churning with ideas. Everything he had seen that day had given him a new perspective on his role as Indian agent. Instead of simply enforcing government policies, he could be an advocate for the Apache people, helping them navigate the complex bureaucracy that affected their daily lives. "Maria," he said as they approached the fort, "I need to ask you something." "Yes?" "That dollar you earned today at the trading post, you said it was $3 total, but Pete only charged you $6 for supplies that probably cost him $4, and he let you keep the extra dollar I paid you." "Why?" Maria was quiet for a moment. "You notice details. That is good for an agent." "But why? What's Pete's angle?" "Pete is not a bad man, but he is a businessman. He knows I bring families to trade at his station. He knows I tell people which traders are honest and which are cheats. A little kindness costs him nothing and brings him customers." "And the raiders that Lieutenant Bradley is chasing?" Maria's expression grew serious. "There are young men who raid ranches and wagon trains, but they are not from the settlements we visited today. They are men who have given up on peaceful solutions, who believe violence is the only way to get justice." "Are they wrong?" "Violence only brings more violence, but I understand their anger. When you watch your children go hungry while government officials get rich from money meant to feed them, when you see your people die from diseases that could be cured with proper medicine, when you are promised help that never comes, anger grows like a fire in dry grass." They had reached the fort, and Maria prepared to ride on to wherever she spent her nights. "Will you come to the agency office tomorrow?" Sam asked. "I want to start working on some of the problems we saw today." "You mean that?" "I do. But I'll need help understanding the best approaches. I'll need someone who knows the people and the culture." "I will come," Maria said. "But Sam?" "Yes. Do not expect changes to come quickly. The people in Washington do not like to admit their programs are not working. They will resist changes that make them look bad." After Maria rode away, Sam returned to his quarters and spent hours writing detailed notes about everything he had seen that day. The magnitude of the challenges facing the Apache people was overwhelming, but for the first time since accepting the position, he felt like he had a clear sense of purpose. The next morning, Sam was at his desk early, drafting letters to his superiors in Washington. He described the living conditions he had observed and outlined specific recommendations for improvements: better housing materials, increased food rations, medical supplies, and funding to reopen the school. Maria arrived at midday carrying a leather satchel filled with papers. "What are those?" Sam asked. "Records," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. For 3 years, I have been keeping track of births, deaths, illnesses, families moving on and off the reservation, the kind of information an agent is supposed to report to Washington. Sam stared at the carefully organized documents. You've been doing the agent's job. Someone had to. The previous agent was more interested in drinking than in helping people. Maria opened the satchel and began laying out her records. Birth certificates written in both Apache and English. Death records with causes of illness or injury noted. Lists of families and their needs. Maps showing the locations of settlements and resources. This is incredible work, Sam said, examining the documents. How did you learn to organize information like this? From watching government officials when they came to make treaties, I saw how they kept records, what information they considered important, so I started keeping the same kind of records for my people. These records show problems that go back years. Why didn't anyone act on this information? Maria gave him a pointed look. Who was I going to give them to? The agent who never left his office? The colonel who thinks all Apache problems can be solved with more soldiers? The officials in Washington who have never been west of the Mississippi River? Sam realized that Maria had been functioning as an unofficial Indian agent for years, doing the job that he was being paid to do. She had identified problems, gathered information, and tried to find solutions, all while her own government ignored or suspected her. I want to hire you, he said impulsively. Hire me? As an assistant agent or cultural liaison. Whatever title it takes to make it official. I need someone who understands both cultures and can help me do this job properly. Maria looked skeptical. The government does not hire Apache women. The government hires people who are qualified for the positions they need to fill, and you're more qualified for this work than anyone else I've met. What would my job be? Help me understand the real needs of the Apache people. Assist with translation and communication. Advise me on cultural matters. Basically, continue doing what you've already been doing, but with official support and a regular salary. Maria was quiet for a long time, considering the offer. How much salary? She asked finally. Whatever the government pays for translator services, plus additional compensation for your other duties. Probably around $40 a month. Maria's eyes widened. $40 was more than most Apache families saw in a year. That would help many people, she said quietly. Then you'll do it? I will try, but there will be problems. The soldiers do not trust Apache people in official positions. Some of my own people will not trust me if I work for the government. We'll face those challenges as they come. Right now, I need your help to understand how to make real improvements in people's lives. Maria reached across the desk and shook his hand. Very well, Samuel Morrison. I will be your assistant agent. But I have one condition. What's that? When we make mistakes, we fix them quickly. When we make promises, we keep them. My people have been disappointed too many times by government officials who say one thing and do another. Agreed, Sam said. As they shook hands, Sam realized that his chance encounter with Maria at the trading post had changed the entire direction of his career. Instead of being just another government bureaucrat trying to impose Washington's will on the Apache people, he was going to become a true advocate for their needs. But he also knew that Maria was right about the challenges they would face. Convincing his superiors to approve innovative approaches would be difficult. Overcoming the prejudices of soldiers and settlers would be even harder. Still, looking at Maria's carefully organized records and remembering the faces of the families they had visited, Sam felt more optimistic about his new position than he had since leaving Chicago. For the first time, he was working with someone who truly understood the problems they were trying to solve. 3 months later, Sam stood in the doorway of the rebuilt school, watching Maria teach a group of 20 Apache children to write their names in English. The classroom buzzed with excitement as children practiced forming letters on slate boards that had arrived the previous week from Phoenix. Very good, Joseph, Maria said in English. then repeated the praise in Apache. Now try writing your Apache name as well. Sam still marveled at how naturally Maria switched between languages, making sure every child understood her instructions. When he had first proposed hiring her as an assistant agent, Colonel Parker had been skeptical. Hiring an Apache woman in an official government position? Morrison, that's never been done before. Then we'll be the first, Sam had replied. It had taken 6 weeks of correspondence with Washington before approval came through, along with pointed questions about Sam's judgment. But the results spoke for themselves. In just 3 months, they had accomplished more than the previous agent had in 2 years. The school was their biggest success. Using Maria's connections and Sam's official authority, they had convinced a group of local merchants to donate materials for repairs. Apache men had provided the labor, and now the building was better than it had ever been. More importantly, they had nearly 40 children enrolled, with more families asking about admission every week. "Mr. Morrison," called a small voice. Sam looked down to see Sarah, a 6-year-old girl who had been one of Maria's first students. "Yes, Sarah. Can you help me write my letter to the president?" Sam smiled. Maria had told the children they could write letters to anyone they wanted to practice their English. Most chose to write to family members, but Sarah had decided to write to the President of the United States. "What do you want to tell him?" Sam asked, kneeling beside her desk. "That Apache children are smart too," Sarah said seriously. "That we can learn just like white children." Sam felt a lump form in his throat. 3 months ago, most people at Fort Apache would have doubted that Apache children could learn to read and write English at all. Now this little girl was preparing to tell the President of the United States that her people deserved the same educational opportunities as anyone else. "That's an excellent message," Sam said. "Let me help you with the spelling." After school ended, Sam and Maria walked together toward the agency office. It had become their daily routine to review the day's activities and plan for tomorrow's challenges. "The school enrollment numbers will impress Washington," Sam said. 40 students in 3 months. "The number is not the important thing," Maria replied. "What matters is that children are learning to read and write in both languages. They are proud of being Apache, but they also understand they need English skills to protect themselves in the white world." Sam had learned to appreciate Maria's different perspective on success. While he focused on statistics and reports that would satisfy his superiors, she measured progress by the confidence he saw growing in Apache children and families. They were interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Lieutenant Bradley rode up with a small patrol, his face grim. "Morrison," he called out, "we need to talk." Sam exchanged glances with Maria. Relations between the agency and the military had been tense since Sam began implementing changes. "What can I do for you, Lieutenant?" Sam asked. Bradley dismounted and approached them, his hand resting on his pistol grip. "We've received reports of increased Apache activity in the mountains north of here, unauthorized movements of people and supplies." "What kind of activities?" Sam asked. "Groups of Apache leaving the reservation without passes. Pack trains moving at night. The kind of things that usually mean trouble." Sam knew that some of their recent successes had required Apache families to travel more freely than usual regulations allowed. When they were establishing new settlements closer to water sources or gathering materials for the school repairs, people had to move around more than the strict reservation boundaries typically permitted. "Have there been any actual incidents? Any violence or theft?" "Not yet," Bradley admitted. "But we've learned not to wait until after the violence starts." Maria stepped forward. "Lieutenant, perhaps if you told us exactly what your scouts have observed, we could explain what is really happening." Bradley's eyes narrowed as he looked at her. "You're the Apache woman Morrison hired, against all regulations, I might add." "I am the assistant agent," Maria replied calmly, "and my employment was approved by the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington." That doesn't change the fact that having an Apache in an official government position creates conflicts of interest. Sam felt his temper rising. What conflicts of interest? Maria has helped us achieve more progress in 3 months than this fort had seen in years. Progress? Bradley laughed harshly. You call it progress when Apache move around freely without military oversight, when they gather in large groups for mysterious purposes, when they suddenly have access to supplies and equipment they've never had before? I call it progress when children learn to read, when families have adequate food and shelter, when people are healthy and hopeful about the future, Sam shot back. You're naive, Morrison. You don't understand Apache tactics. They're using your good intentions to organize themselves for something bigger. Maria had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. What do you think we are organizing for, Lieutenant? Coordinated resistance. Maybe another outbreak like the one in '85. You Apaches are good at disappearing into the mountains when you want to cause trouble. Or maybe, Maria said with deadly calm, we are organizing to build a better life for our children. Maybe we are organizing to prove that Apache people can be productive citizens when given a fair chance. That's a nice story, Bradley said, but I've seen Apache productivity before. It usually involves raided ranches and dead settlers. Sam had heard enough. Lieutenant, unless you have specific evidence of wrongdoing, I suggest you focus your patrols on actual threats rather than harassing families who are trying to improve their lives. Bradley's face reddened. I'm trying to prevent bloodshed, Morrison. When your Apache friends start raiding again, remember this conversation. He remounted and rode off with his patrol, leaving Sam and Maria standing in a cloud of dust. He's going to be a problem, Sam said. He has always been a problem, Maria replied. But now we have something to protect, so we must be more careful. That evening, Sam was working late in his office when he heard a commotion outside. Voices were raised in anger, and he could hear Colonel Parker shouting orders. Sam hurried outside to see what was happening. In the center of the compound, Lieutenant Bradley stood facing a group of Apache men, women, and children. The Apache group was led by an elderly man, whom Sam recognized as Chief Alcacay, Maria's father. "What's going on here?" Sam demanded. This Apache group was trying to enter the fort without permission, Bradley said. Armed men, women, and children. Classic war party formation. Sam looked at the group more closely. The armed men Bradley was referring to were carrying tools, shovels, hammers, saws. The women and children were carrying bundles that looked like food and blankets. Chief Alcacay, Sam said, stepping forward. What brings you here tonight? The chief spoke in Apache, his voice dignified despite the tense situation. Maria appeared from somewhere in the group and translated. My father says he brings gifts for the school. Tomorrow is the harvest celebration, and families wanted to contribute supplies and decorations. Sam turned to Bradley. These people are bringing supplies for a school celebration. What exactly did you think they were going to attack with? Spelling books? You can't be serious, Morrison. A group of 40 Apache showing up at the fort at night, and you think it's a social visit? I think it's exactly what they say it is, Sam replied firmly. Chief, please tell your people they are welcome here. Maria translated, and Sam could see relief spread across the faces in the Apache group. Children began chattering excitedly, and women started unpacking bundles to show the things they had brought. But Lieutenant Bradley was not finished. This is highly irregular, Morrison. Security protocols exist for good reasons. Security protocols that assume Apache people are enemies instead of neighbors, Sam countered. These people are contributing to a school that serves their children. They have every right to be here. Colonel Parker approached the group, having observed the exchange from a distance. What's the nature of this celebration? He asked. Chief Alcacay spoke again, and Maria translated. He says it is a harvest celebration to give thanks for the good growing season and to honor the children who have learned so much. He invites all the people of the fort to join the celebration tomorrow. The colonel looked surprised. He's inviting the soldiers and civilians to attend an Apache celebration? Yes, Maria said. My father believes that understanding between our peoples grows when we share our traditions with each other. Sam could see the colonel considering this unprecedented invitation. Relations between the fort and the Apache had been improving, but a joint celebration would be a significant step forward. Very well, Colonel Parker decided. We'll allow the celebration to proceed, but I want extra guards posted around the perimeter. Bradley started to protest, but the colonel cut him off. That's my decision, Lieutenant. The next day brought the most remarkable event Sam had ever witnessed at Fort Apache. Apache families had worked through the night to prepare traditional foods, decorations, and entertainment. They had set up their celebration in the area around the school, transforming the dusty compound into something beautiful and festive. Colorful blankets and beadwork decorated the school building. The smell of roasting meat and corn cakes filled the air. Apache musicians played traditional instruments while children demonstrated the reading and writing skills they had learned. To Sam's amazement, many of the soldiers and civilian workers attended. At first, they stood apart in nervous groups, but gradually they began to mingle with the Apache families. Language barriers led to creative communication through gestures and laughter. This is remarkable, Colonel Parker said to Sam as they watched soldiers and Apache men sharing a meal. I've never seen anything like it. Maria's father is a wise leader, Sam replied. He understands that fear comes from unfamiliarity. When people know each other as individuals, it's harder to see them as enemies. The highlight of the celebration came when Chief Alchese stood to address the gathering. Maria translated as he spoke. My father thanks everyone for coming to honor the children and their learning. He says education is the bridge between our peoples. When Apache children learn English, they can speak for themselves. When white people learn about Apache ways, they see we are not so different. The chief continued, and Maria's translation brought surprised murmurs from the crowd. He says our people have learned much from Agent Morrison and the others who work for understanding. But we have also taught them things. He says this is how it should be, both peoples learning from each other. Then the chief did something that made Sam's heart skip. He walked over to where Sam was standing and said something directly to him in careful English. Agent Morrison, you keep promises. You listen with open heart. You see Apache people as human beings, not problems to solve. For this, my people thank you. The gathering erupted in applause from both Apache and military personnel. Sam felt overwhelmed by the chief's words and the success of the celebration. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. As the celebration was winding down, Maria approached Sam with a small bundle wrapped in decorated cloth. This is from my father, she said, and from the families whose children attend the school. Sam unwrapped the bundle to find a beautifully crafted piece of silver jewelry, a medallion engraved with symbols from both Apache and American traditions. It's beautiful, Sam said. But I can't accept such an expensive gift. It is not expensive, Maria smiled. It cost $3 to make. Sam looked at her in confusion. $3? The silver came from coins that families saved, including the dollar you paid me at the trading post the day we met. Everyone contributed what they could. The silversmith charged only for his time, not for his skill. The engraving was done by an Apache woman who learned the art from her grandmother. Sam stared at the medallion, understanding flooding over him. The $3 represented much more than the cost of materials. It represented the pooled resources of families who had very little, given freely to honor someone who had shown them respect. The symbols, Maria explained, pointing to the engravings, represent the joining of two paths. This eagle is Apache, representing wisdom and strength. This star is American, representing hope and guidance. Together they mean that our peoples can fly toward the same sky. Sam felt tears forming in his eyes. I don't know what to say. Say that you will continue to walk both paths, Maria replied. Say that you will remember that $3 from poor families can mean more than $300 from rich men. That evening, after all the guests had departed and the cleanup was finished, Sam and Maria sat on the steps of the school building, watching the sunset paint the mountains red and gold. Today changed everything, Sam said. Even Lieutenant Bradley seemed impressed by the end. Bradley fears what he does not understand, Maria replied. Today he saw Apache people as families with children who love them, not as dangerous strangers. Fear cannot survive understanding. What's next for us? Sam asked. What challenges will we face as we expand these programs? Maria was quiet for a moment. There will always be people who profit from conflict between our peoples. They will try to stop our progress. But I think we have shown that cooperation is stronger than conflict. Sam fingered the silver medallion in his pocket. When I first met you at that boulder, I thought you were just an Apache woman who happened to be in the right place at the right time. And what do you think now? I think you were exactly where you were supposed to be. I think our meeting was the beginning of something much bigger than either of us imagined. Maria smiled. My father would say that the spirits brought us together for a purpose. That purpose was not just to help one fort or one school, but to prove that understanding between peoples is possible. Do you believe that? I believe that $3 spent with wisdom can change more lives than $3,000 spent with ignorance. I believe that one Apache woman and one white man working together can accomplish more than an army of people working against each other. Sam looked out at the fort compound, where Apache and military families were settling in for the night. Children who had played together at the celebration were calling goodnight to each other in 2 languages. Soldiers who had shared meals with Apache families were seeing their neighbors with new eyes. You surprised me in ways I never expected, he said to Maria. How? You taught me that being an Indian agent isn't about controlling Apache people or forcing them to abandon their culture. It's about helping 2 peoples understand each other well enough to build a future together. And you surprised me as well, Maria replied. How? You proved that not all government men are interested only in power and profit. You showed me that some white people are willing to listen and learn. That gives me hope for my children's future. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sam realized that his encounter with Maria had transformed him from a nervous bureaucrat into someone who truly understood his purpose. The $3 that had started their relationship as a simple trading transaction had grown into something much more valuable, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. 6 months later, Sam received a letter from Washington that would change his life again. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, impressed by the success at Fort Apache, wanted him to establish similar programs at other reservations throughout the territory. They were particularly interested in his innovative approach of hiring Native Americans as official staff members. They want us to travel to 4 other forts, Sam told Maria as he shared the contents of the letter. Train new agents and establish education programs. Us? Maria asked. The letter specifically requests that Assistant Agent Maria Alchazay accompany me to provide expertise on cross-cultural communication and education methods. Maria was quiet for a long moment. That would mean leaving home for many months. It would. But think about how many children we could help, how many families we could reach. And you want me to come? Sam looked at her seriously. Maria, I've learned that I can't do this work without you. You don't just translate language, you translate understanding. You don't just teach children to read, you teach communities to hope. Maria stood and walked to the window of the agency office, looking out at the school where children were playing during recess. Apache and white children were playing together, their laughter mixing in the mountain air. My father would be proud to know that his daughter was chosen to help Apache people far from home, she said finally. But he would also worry about me traveling so far from family. What do you want to do? Maria turned back to face him. I want to do what we started here. I want to prove that Apache people can be partners, not just subjects. I want to show the world that $3 spent with wisdom can change everything. Then you'll come? I'll come, she said, but I have one condition. What's that? Promise me that no matter how important we become, no matter how many officials want to meet with us, we will never forget the faces of the children we taught to read. We will never forget that real success is measured in hope, not in government reports. Sam extended his hand to shake on their agreement. But Maria surprised him by offering a traditional Apache gesture of respect instead. Sam followed her lead, and they sealed their new partnership in the way of her people. A year later, newspapers across the country were reporting on the Apache Miracle, a new approach to Indian affairs that emphasized education, cultural respect, and Native American leadership. Sam and Maria had established successful programs at 7 forts, trained dozens of agents, and helped hundreds of families. But for Sam, the most important measure of their success remained the same as it had been that first day at Willow Creek Station. It wasn't about the articles in newspapers or the commendations from Washington. It was about the moment when Maria had shared her water with a stranger, proving that kindness could cross any cultural divide. The silver medallion still hung around his neck, a daily reminder that the most valuable things in life often cost far less than expected. $3. That's all it had taken to begin a friendship that changed 2 lives and countless others. And sometimes, late at night when he was writing reports or preparing for the next day's challenges, Sam would remember that hot afternoon in the desert when an Apache woman had offered water to a lost stranger. He would remember thinking she was just another person he had happened to encounter on his journey. He had been wrong about that, just as he had been wrong about so many other things. Maria hadn't been a chance encounter. She had been the beginning of everything that mattered in his new life. The Apache woman had surprised him in ways he never could have expected, and in doing so, she had shown him what was possible when people chose understanding over fear, partnership over power, and wisdom over wealth. $3. That's all it had cost to change the world.